Are you still holding on to something that ended long ago? A thought, a fear, a promise that no one ever told you could be released. Maybe tonight, you're still bracing for a world that no longer exists, still guarding your heart like a soldier waiting for orders that never came. That's okay. Tonight, you don't need to fight. You don't need to explain why it's still hard. Just lay back, feel the softness beneath you. Imagine the ground no longer as battlefield, but as a resting place. Take a breath in slowly, let it fill your chest. Hold and exhale like the forest wind brushing away an old command. Once more. Inhale, hold, exhale, you are safe. Now let me tell you the story of a man who stayed in the jungle long after the war had ended. A man who kept fighting because no one told him it was time to rest. This is the quiet story of Hiroo Onoda, and perhaps in some way, it is also a story about you. Main story, Part 1. The boy who was taught to never surrender, the blueprint of loyalty. Hiroo Onoda was born in 1922 in Japan. His birth year placed him squarely into a nation that was, even then, already wrapped in a profound sense of silence, discipline, and expectations. This was not the boisterous, individualistic freedom of other cultures. Here, silence was a virtue, a sign of respect and thoughtful consideration woven into the very fabric of daily life. From the hushed reverence of a tea ceremony to the quiet dedication in a craftsman's workshop, every moment carried an unspoken depth. Discipline wasn't merely about following rules. It was a deeply ingrained spiritual practice, a refinement of self, a commitment to excellence in every small action. And expectations, though often unvoiced, were omnipresent. The expectation of loyalty to family, community, and emperor, of contributing to the collective good, of striving for perfection in one's chosen path. These weren't just abstract concepts, they were lived realities, tangible principles learned from the youngest age, from the way children learn to hold their chopsticks with precision and grace, to the respectful, almost ritualistic bow offered to elders and superiors. Every gesture, every softly spoken word, every quiet moment of contemplation carried profound meaning, a reflection of a society meticulously built on order, harmony, and deep-rooted traditions that stretched back centuries. As a boy, Hiroo learned these lessons not through grand pronouncements, but through daily observation, through the quiet example set by his parents and community. He was taught not just the graceful art of the bow, a simple bend of the body that was in fact a profound symbol of humility, respect, and acknowledging one's place in the intricate social tapestry. But beyond mere etiquette, he was taught something far more fundamental, something that would indelibly shape his entire destiny and define his very being: how to endure. He learned to withstand discomfort without complaint, to sit in uncomfortable positions for long periods, to bear hunger or cold with a stoic, unyielding resolve. This was a training not just of the body, but of the spirit. He was taught to keep going, to persevere, even when every fiber of his being yearned to stop, when exhaustion blurred his vision, when pain whispered promises of relief. This resilience was especially crucial in the face of the profound solitude he would eventually encounter, the ability to persist even when utterly, profoundly alone, with no external validation or support. This wasn't just physical toughness, the brute force of muscle. It was a deeply ingrained mental fortitude, a spiritual resilience forged in the quiet fire of self-mastery. He learned to remain loyal, not just to people or places in the immediate vicinity, but to an abstract ideal, to a promise, to a cause, even when the bond seemed stretched to breaking point, even in the hypothetical, unimaginable scenario of being abandoned or forgotten. And most crucially, he was taught to believe in orders, to uphold them with unyielding, almost religious faith, to consider them sacred and immutable, even when the very source of those orders seemed to have vanished into the mists of time, even when no one was physically left to give them or reiterate them. His training instilled within him an almost absolute, unquestioning trust in the chain of command, a belief that an order, once given, carried an almost sacred weight, binding him in perpetuity. He wasn't raised to question. The emphasis in his upbringing and in the broader cultural ethos was not on individual inquiry, on challenging authority, or on deviation from the established path. Instead, the focus was firmly on collective harmony, on moving as one, and on unwavering adherence to duty. He was raised not to dissect or analyze the commands, but to withstand, to be strong in the face of adversity, to be an unmovable pillar of commitment, a steadfast guardian of principles. This profound commitment to endurance and unwavering loyalty was the very bedrock of his character, silently laid brick by brick through childhood lessons, through the stories of samurai and heroes, and through the deeply ingrained societal values that celebrated such virtues. When the time came, as it did for so many young men of his generation, and he joined the Imperial Japanese Army, he was already primed for a life of profound dedication and sacrifice. His innate discipline, his quiet strength, his capacity for endurance did not go unnoticed by his superiors. He was handpicked for a special unit, an intelligence and commando school at Fudamata. This was not a place for the faint of heart or for those who sought glory in open, conventional battle. It was a place for shadows, for operatives who would become like ghosts, for the unseen warriors who operated behind enemy lines, disrupting and observing. Here, he was rigorously trained in the most demanding forms of survival, learning not just to subsist, but to thrive off the land with minimal resources, to find potable water in the thickest jungle, to identify edible plants amidst poisonous lookalikes, to fashion traps for small game. He learned to read the subtlest signs of the jungle, the direction of a bird's flight, the faint scent of human presence carried on the wind, the almost imperceptible disturbance of a leaf. He mastered the arcane arts of deception, of blending so perfectly into the environment that he became invisible to the enemy, moving without breaking a single twig, leaving no trace. And he became an unparalleled master of jungle warfare, understanding the intricate language of the dense foliage, the hidden paths known only to animals, the silent movements required to stalk or evade in the suffocating embrace of the tropics. Their mission, deeply ingrained in the souls of these elite soldiers, was instilled with a gravity that went far beyond mere military strategy or tactical objectives. It was a creed, a spiritual imperative that resonated with their childhood teachings. Never surrender, never die, continue your duty even if cut off from the homeland. These were not just a series of cold, strategic instructions to be memorized or a checklist of combat directives. They were meticulously, patiently stitched into the very soul of young Hiroo, woven into his conscious and subconscious mind until they became an indivisible part of his identity. They became his guiding star, a moral compass more brilliant and constant than any constellation in the night sky. The very idea of surrender was not just a military failure. It was presented as a moral, spiritual degradation, an unthinkable act that would bring dishonor to himself, his family, and his nation. To die honorably in the course of duty was the ultimate sacrifice and the greatest glory. To surrender was simply not an option, an act that would violate the very essence of his being. In December 1944, as the brutal tides of World War II were already beginning their relentless turn against Japan, Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, a man imbued with this profound and unwavering spirit of loyalty and discipline, was deployed. He was dropped quietly and efficiently into the dense emerald jungles of Lubang Island in the Philippines. The air was thick with a humid, almost palpable warmth, a constant embrace of moisture. The sounds of unseen creatures vibrated through the leaves, the buzz of insects, the chirping of unseen birds, the distant cries of monkeys, creating a symphony of life that was utterly foreign. yet soon to become his world. His specific orders, given directly and with utmost seriousness by his superior, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, were crystal clear, echoing the core tenets of his rigorous training: to disrupt enemy operations, targeting airfields and harbors, gathering intelligence, creating sabotage, and above all else, to never give in. He was to wage a prolonged guerrilla war, to be a persistent thorn in the side of the advancing Allied forces, to hold his ground no matter the cost or the duration. The crushing, heart-wrenching reality, however, remained utterly unknown to him. The grand global war he was fighting was already nearing its desperate, violent end. The vast strategies were crumbling, the mighty armies were retreating, and the global conflict was drawing to a close, a mere few months away from Japan's surrender. But no one told him that. No clear, official message from his superiors, no direct, unambiguous command to cease hostilities, no communication of any kind that he could verify as legitimate had reached his ears. He was a small, vital cog in a massive machine that was rapidly grinding to a halt, dissolving into dust, yet he believed his part remained absolutely essential, his mission undiminished. So when the deafening roar of distant gunfire, the relentless bark of machine guns, and the earth-shaking concussions of bombs began to fade, slowly, gradually, into a profound, eerie quiet, a deep silence descended upon Lubang Island. Hiroo Onoda, ever the meticulous soldier, ever the vigilant sentinel, listened carefully. He strained his ears, his senses acutely tuned to the rhythm of warfare, searching for any telltale sign of continued battle, any distant explosion, any faint cry. And when all he heard was the soft rustle of leaves stirred by an imperceptible breeze, the chirping of insects, a persistent rhythmic hum, the distant murmur of the sea, a constant lulling whisper, the profound, overwhelming silence that followed the storm, he interpreted it through the lens of his training and his orders. He assumed it meant only one thing: the enemy was still there. The fight was merely in a new, more subtle phase, a quieter, more insidious one of infiltration and covert operations. His duty, therefore, was not merely unchanged, but intensified. His orders remained absolute: keep going, stay hidden, stay loyal. The silence to him was not an end, but a confirmation of his mission, a sign that the true war had simply gone underground, and his vigilance was needed now more than ever. Main Story, Part 2, The Forest That Became a War. The unseen enemy of time. The jungle was no longer just a place, a geographical location on a map of the Philippines, a mere backdrop to his mission. For Hiroo Onoda, the dense, suffocating green became his entire world, his universe, the only reality he knew. Every vine, every tree, every unseen creature rustling in the undergrowth, every whisper of the wind through the vast canopy carried meaning, a potential sign of the enemy, a vital clue for survival. It was a vast, living labyrinth, both his intricate sanctuary and his perpetual, silent battlefield. The very air he breathed seemed charged with the unspoken tension of constant vigilance. Hiroo Onoda, initially with a few comrades, Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, and Private Kinshichi Kozuka, began to carve out an existence designed not for a temporary skirmish, but for an eternal conflict. Their shelters were masterpieces of ingenuity and camouflage, meticulously woven from palm leaves, pliable bamboo, and any salvaged tarpaulin they could find, blending so seamlessly into the verdant canopy above that they became virtually invisible from even a short distance. They moved with the silent, fluid grace of wild animals, their bodies adapting to the constant demands of the uneven, treacherous terrain. Every step was deliberate, every movement economical. Survival meant unwavering, constant vigilance, perpetual motion to avoid detection, and a complete, intuitive mastery of their harsh environment. They became experts at stealing food from nearby farms, their raids conducted under the deepest cloak of night, silent as phantoms. They would take just enough rice, a handful of bananas, or a piece of fruit to sustain their meager existence, never daring to take too much lest they draw undue attention. Each raid was a meticulously planned tactical operation, executed with military precision. The stolen sustenance, a tribute exacted from the enemy, a necessary part of their ongoing war effort. He watched, he waited, he listened. His senses, honed by years of constant threat, became preternaturally sharp, acutely attuned to the slightest shift in the jungle's symphony, the faint snap of a twig that wasn't wind-broken, the distant hum of an unfamiliar propeller, the subtle, faint scent of human habitation carried on the humid air. Every flicker of movement, every unusual sound was immediately processed, analyzed, and categorized. And he believed, with an unshakable, absolute conviction that bordered on the sacred, that the war still raged fiercely beyond the impenetrable wall of leaves, beyond the immediate confines of Lubang Island. The fighting may have quieted in his immediate vicinity, but it was merely a temporary lull, a tactical pause, a feint in a larger, ongoing global conflict. His mission was to remain hidden, to gather intelligence, to strike when the moment was right. In the years that followed, the outside world, in its earnest yet ultimately futile attempt to reach him, began to drop flyers from the sky. Small planes like metallic birds against the vast blue would circle overhead, releasing bundles of paper that fluttered down through the trees, landing softly on the jungle floor, mingling innocuously with the fallen leaves and damp earth. These were messages, printed in crisp Japanese characters, bold and clear. The war is over. Come out. Japan has surrendered. Sometimes there were photographs of Japanese families, smiling, happy, living in a world of peace, images meant to tug at the heartstrings of lost soldiers. Sometimes there were even letters from former comrades who had already returned home, pleading with them to cease their vigil. But Onoda didn't believe them, not for a single wavering moment. His rigorous training, deeply etched into his very being, had explicitly warned him about psychological warfare, about clever propaganda designed to break enemy morale and lure soldiers out of hiding. These flyers, these scattered pieces of paper from the sky, were nothing more than elaborate tricks, cunning deceptions from the enemy, designed to lure him out, to capture him, to extract vital military information. How could he possibly trust a flimsy piece of paper falling from a foreign sky when the sacred orders given to him by his superiors were so clear, so absolute, so uncompromising? Never surrender? The very notion seemed absurd, a betrayal of everything he stood for, because no one he trusted had told him otherwise. No superior officer, no direct commander, no voice from the homeland that he recognized and revered had given him the counter-order. The very core of his being, the absolute, unyielding loyalty instilled in him since childhood, demanded a direct command from a legitimate authority. Without it, the initial order remained inviolable, the most sacred truth, the guiding principle of his every breath. And so, he stayed. Year after year, the world outside, a world he no longer knew, moved on with astonishing, almost dizzying speed. Cities were rebuilt from the ashes of war, rising taller and brighter than before. Economies soared to unprecedented heights, driven by innovation and hard work. New technologies emerged, transforming daily life in ways unimaginable to him. New generations were born, growing up in prosperity and peace, completely unaware of the brutal conflict that had once defined their nation. But Hiroo, in the profound isolation of his jungle, remained utterly, completely frozen in time, meticulously trapped in 1945. His calendar was the cycle of the sun and moon, the relentless rhythm of the monsoons that drenched the earth, the dry seasons that baked it hard. His reality was the war he was still fighting, a war that existed only within the confines of his unwavering mind. His uniform, once crisp and new, a symbol of pride, became a tattered relic, patched meticulously with bark fibers, woven leaves, and any salvaged scraps of cloth they could find, a testament to his unending commitment and desperate ingenuity. He polished his rifle daily, its cold steel a familiar comfort, a vital extension of his body, a symbol of his enduring duty, even though the precious bullets, dwindling in number, began to rust in the pervasive humidity. He stood guard through typhoons that tore through the canopy with terrifying, destructive force, through monsoons that drenched him to the bone for weeks on end, through the oppressive, silent heat of dry seasons that cracked the earth. Each natural phenomenon was simply another adversary to be withstood, another test of his unwavering resolve, another facet of the enduring war. He didn't surrender, not even when hunger gnawed relentlessly at his stomach, a constant dull ache, not when debilitating diseases like malaria and dysentery weakened his body, leaving him feverish and frail, not when the crushing weight of loneliness threatened to consume his mind, whispering temptations of surrender, of companionship, of ease. Because in his heart, in the deepest, most fundamental core of his being, he simply wasn't allowed to. The order was absolute, a spiritual imperative that superseded physical pain, yearnings for comfort, or even the logical demands of reason. It was beyond questioning. Slowly, inexorably, the small group of comrades dwindled. Each departure, each loss, was a silent wound. One by one, his fellow soldiers either made the agonizing decision to leave, driven by despair or a flicker of doubt, unable to sustain the endless, unseen war, or they were tragically killed, succumbing to disease, unexpected accidents in the treacherous terrain, or skirmishes with local islanders who saw them as a lingering threat to their peaceful lives. Private Akatsu, after years of hardship, weary of the endless fight, finally slipped away in 1949 and eventually surrendered, a choice Onoda likely viewed as a profound betrayal. Corporal Shimada, the oldest of the group, a steady presence, was tragically shot and killed in 1954 during a conflict with local farmers, leaving a gaping void. Private Kozuka, a loyal and stoic companion for decades, his silent presence of vital reassurance, was finally killed in 1972 during a clash with a police patrol, leaving Onoda truly, profoundly isolated. Until, at last, after years of shared hardship, of whispered plans, of shared silences and mutual understanding, Hiroo Onoda was truly alone. Alone with the ancient whispering trees, his only constant companions, their rustling leaves and creaking branches, the sole, monotonous soundtrack of his profound solitude. Alone with the mission, the absolute, unyielding command that had become the singular, burning purpose of his entire existence, a burden he carried with unwavering pride. Alone with the silence, a profound, heavy silence that stretched across decades, broken only by the sounds of the jungle and the echoes of his own unwavering thoughts, a silence that became both his torment and his peculiar shield. He was a sentinel in a forgotten war, a man defined by absence, by profound loyalty, and by the relentless ticking of an internal clock counting the moments of an unfulfilled duty. Main Story Part 3. The Order That Set Him Free. The Whisper of Peace. The years blurred. Not just weeks or months, but entire decades evaporated into the endless green expanse of the jungle. From 1950, a year that saw the world beginning to rebuild and redefine itself after the devastation of war, to 1960, when new nations were rising from colonial ashes and old empires faded into history, to 1970, a time when humanity had dared to walk on the moon and technology had begun to transform global society in unimaginable ways. The world outside the emerald curtain of Lubang Island changed with dizzying speed, transforming beyond all recognition. But for Hiroo Onoda, the forest remained. It was an unchanging, timeless fortress, a perpetual theater of war, its rhythm the only constant he recognized. And still, Hiroo Onoda stayed hidden. His movements through the dense underbrush were so silent, so practiced, honed by nearly 3 decades of evasion, that they defied detection. He moved like a shadow, a phantom integrated into the very ecosystem of the jungle. He became a part of the landscape, camouflaged not just by his patched uniform, but by his very being. He slept beneath vast, sheltering leaves, using hollows in ancient trees as his temporary sanctuary, always alert, always ready to spring into action, his senses attuned to the slightest disturbance. His survival depended on an intricate knowledge of the jungle's flora and fauna, which berries were edible, which roots provided sustenance, which small animals could be snared for protein. He sustained himself on wild bananas, foraging for fruits he had never known in Japan, and on precious stolen rice, a staple that reminded him, however faintly, of home, of a world that once was, a ghost of a memory. He believed, with the unwavering certainty that had sustained him for so long, that he was still a soldier, not just in title, but in every fiber of his being, every waking thought, every silent action. His mind, honed by years of absolute solitary focus, remained sharp, constantly analyzing, planning, executing his singular duty. He believed he was still needed, that his vigilance was crucial to the greater war effort, that his small, isolated unit, now just himself, was holding a vital flank in a vast, ongoing but unseen battle. He was still in a war, a personal, fierce war that raged constantly within the confines of his mind and the unwavering boundaries of his jungle domain. But by now, Japan had become a different country entirely. The nation he remembered, the one for which he had sworn his absolute loyalty, the one he believed he was still fighting for, had risen from the ashes of war, not through military conquest, but through peace, industry, and innovation. There were intricate networks of superhighways crisscrossing the land, bustling with new models of cars. Television sets flickered in nearly every home, broadcasting images of a world he couldn't possibly imagine. Images of prosperity, of cultural shifts, of an unrecognizable modernity. Children, who had never known war, were growing up in an era of peace and abundance, their laughter filling parks and schoolyards. They had never heard his name, never known of his profound, unwavering vigil in a distant jungle. Hiroo Onoda was a ghost from a past era, an echo of a forgotten conflict, a relic of a time that no longer existed. For years, attempts had been made to find him, or at least to confirm his status. Expeditions, search parties, even recorded messages from family members and former comrades were broadcast from planes, pleading with him to return. But Onoda's training was too thorough, his belief in enemy deception too profound. He interpreted every friendly gesture as a trick, every message dropped from the sky as a clever ruse designed to lure him into a trap. He saw the efforts to bring him home not as salvation, but as insidious enemy infiltration, attempts to break his spirit and extract valuable military information. The more subtle and persuasive the messages became, the more convinced he became that they were sophisticated psychological warfare, a testament to the enemy's cunning. He was unyielding, anchored by his original sacred orders, which remained inviolable until a legitimate counterorder was given. Then one day, a ripple, a tremor in the fabric of his long, isolated vigil. It was 1974. A young Japanese traveler arrived on Lubang Island. He wasn't a soldier, not a government official, not part of an organized search party. He was Norio Suzuki, a self-proclaimed adventurer with an eccentric, almost whimsical personal quest to find a panda, a wild man, and Lieutenant Onoda. Suzuki, unlike all who had come before, approached the jungle with a different spirit, one of curiosity and respect rather than military precision or official urgency. He left no traps, issued no warnings, carried no weapons. He simply ventured in, openly, genuinely seeking connection. And incredibly, against all odds, after nearly 3 decades of evasion, of existing as a phantom in the jungle, Norio Suzuki found him. Suzuki left notes, simple, heartfelt messages about a Japan that was truly at peace, a world that was waiting for him. He called out to Onoda, patiently, persistently, but without force or aggression. Hiroo, observing from the shadows as he always did, saw something profoundly different in Suzuki. Perhaps it was the genuine sincerity in the young man's eyes, the lack of military pretense, the utter absence of threat. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped from the shadows, emerging into the filtered sunlight. He was thin and gaunt, his uniform a patched and faded testament to the passage of time, but his posture was still rigid, his eyes sharp and guarded. His rifle, a precious extension of his being, still gleamed with meticulous care, testament to his unwavering discipline. He spoke to Suzuki, carefully assessing him, testing the waters of this impossible encounter. He did not surrender, because he still hadn't received the precise, legitimate orders from his superior that would allow him to do so. The sacred command, the blueprint of his entire existence, had not yet been rescinded. So Norio Suzuki, understanding with profound empathy the depth of Onoda's loyalty, knowing that only a direct order could break this unbreakable man, went back to Japan. He did not go to celebrate his discovery, but to fulfill a solemn duty to the soldier he had found. He returned, this time with Onoda's former commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, now an old man, long retired from the military, running a quiet, unassuming bookstore in Japan. The very man who had given him his last binding order. On that quiet, humid day in the heart of the jungle, amidst the rustling leaves and the buzzing insects, a moment of profound, almost sacred history unfolded. Major Taniguchi, now stooped with age, his face etched with the wisdom of years, but with eyes that still recognized the unwavering loyalty in his former subordinate, looked Hiroo directly in the eyes. There was no fanfare, no grand ceremony, no loud pronouncements from officials, just the simple, profound weight of a command finally being issued, a long-awaited truth. And then Major Taniguchi gave him the words Hiroo had been waiting for, the only words that could ever set him free, the only words that could pierce the armor of 3 decades of unwavering duty and unyielding belief. Lieutenant Onoda, you are relieved of duty. A lifetime of waiting, of vigilance, of isolated struggle, of unyielding belief, distilled into those few, simple, liberating words. The weight of an impossible mission, the burden of a forgotten war, lifted in an instant. Onoda stood tall, his posture still ramrod straight, the discipline of decades flowing through every fiber of his being. He raised his hands slowly, meticulously, precisely, and gave a crisp, perfect salute, a final, poignant act of soldierly reverence, a last acknowledgement of the command structure that had defined his adult life. And after 29 years, 7 months, and 26 days, he gently laid down his rifle. The familiar, comforting weight left his hands, a physical release of a lifelong burden that had been both his purpose and his prison. He surrendered his sword, his pistol, and 500 rounds of ammunition, symbols of a war that had ended long ago for everyone but him. He was no longer a ghost of the past, but a man finally untethered from an impossible mission, finally allowed to rest. He returned to Japan not as a proclaimed hero, though many saw him as such, but as a living question, a profound, unsettling question to a modern world that had long forgotten the intensity of such unwavering loyalty, such absolute commitment. How do you stop fighting when no one told you it was okay to stop? How do you re-enter a world that has moved on when your entire being was shaped by a reality that no longer exists? His story became a testament to the unyielding power of the human spirit. Yes, but also a quiet contemplation on the nature of duty, of command, of profound silence, and of the unique way in which one man's unwavering belief can echo through a single life, shaping it utterly. Letting go of long battles. Maybe tonight, you too are carrying a war that ended long ago, a thought you fought with for years, a version of yourself you keep trying to protect. What if you don't need to guard anymore? What if it's safe to rest? You don't need a formal order. You don't need someone's permission. You just need to feel the moment, this moment, and know you've made it here. That's enough. Whatever forest you've been wandering through, This bed tonight can be your soft clearing. Now gently return to your body. Let your head sink into the pillow, your shoulders soft and slow, your arms still and light. Let your breath move naturally, no rhythm to force, just presence. Inhale, hold, exhale as if dropping your armor to the ground. One more time. Inhale, hold, exhale, let go. Tonight you are not a soldier. You are not in a war. You are home. You are safe. You are allowed to rest. Good night, gentle warrior. Sleep well.